Hi, 8th graders. It's Mr. Castleman here with another video. We're going to be reading Chapter 6, Sections 2 and 3 today, and also answering a few questions, ISN questions. So what you need to have open is you need to go to the TCI page, go to Lesson 6 or Chapter 6, the Declaration of Independence. Then you're going to go to Section 2. The name of it is The Colonists Organize an Army. You're not going to need anything else because I'm going to have you answer the ISN questions right here at the bottom of the page. But as you saw on the agenda for today, you don't have to answer all of the questions, just the ones that I tell you, okay? All right, so let's start reading Section 2 of Chapter 6. The colonists organize an army. On May 10th, 1775, the Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia. By then, New England militia had amassed around Boston. The first question facing Congress was who should command this New England army? The obvious answer was a New Englander, George Washington and the Continental Army. John Adams of Massachusetts had another idea. He proposed that Congress create a, quote, continental army made up of troops from all of the colonies. To lead this army, Adams nominated a, quote, gentleman whose skill and experience as an officer, whose great talents and excellent universal character would unite the colonies better than any other person, unquote, alive. That man was George Washington of Virginia, who had distinguished himself in the French and Indian War. The delegates agreed. They unanimously elected Washington to be commander-in-chief of the new Continental Army. The Battle of Bunker Hill. Meanwhile, militiamen near Boston made plans to fortify two hills that overlooked the city, Bunker Hill and Breed's Hill. On the night of June 16, 1775, Israel Putnam led a few hundred men up Breed's Hill. In 4 hours of furious digging, they erected a crude fort on the top of the hill. So they built a kind of a fort at the top of Breed's Hill. The fort worried British General William Howe, who had just arrived from England with fresh troops. Howe ordered an immediate attack. Under a hot June sun, some 2,000 British troops formed two long lines at the base of Breed's Hill. At Howe's order, the redcoats marched up the slope. As the lines moved ever closer, Putnam ordered his men, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. Only when the British were almost on top of them did the militiamen pull their triggers. The red lines broke and fell back in confusion. The British regrouped and attacked again. Once more, the Americans stopped their advance. On their third attack, the redcoats finally took the hill, but only because the Americans had used up all their gunpowder and pulled back. The clash, which became known as the Battle of Bunker Hill, was short but very bloody. More than 1,000 British troops and nearly half that many Americans were killed or wounded. All right, next section. George Washington takes command. George Washington took command of his new army shortly after the Battle of Bunker Hill. He found a, quote, mixed multitude of people under very little discipline, order, or government, end quote. Washington worked hard to impose order. One man wrote, quote, everyone is made to know his place and keep in it. It is surprising how much work has been done, unquote. A month later, however, a dismayed Washington learned that the army had only 36 barrels of gunpowder, enough for each soldier to fire just 9 shots. To deceive the British, or to trick them, Washington started a rumor in Boston that he had 1,800 barrels of gunpowder, more than he knew what to do with. Luckily, the British believed the rumor. Meanwhile, Washington sent desperate letters to the colonies begging for gunpowder. Washington got his powder, but he did not dare attack the British forces in Boston. To do that, he needed artillery, heavy guns such as cannons, to bombard their defenses. In desperation, Washington sent a Boston bookseller named Henry Knox to Fort Ticonderoga to round up some big guns. Ticonderoga was an old British fort located at the southern end of Lake Champlain in New York. A few months earlier, militiamen led by Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold had seized the fort. The Americans had little use for the rundown fort, but its guns would prove priceless. As winter set in, Knox loaded 59 cannons onto huge sleds and dragged them 300 miles to Boston. Knox's 42 sleds also carried 2,300 pounds of lead for making bullets. Boston was about to be under siege. The British abandoned Boston. On March 4th, 1776, the British soldiers in Boston awoke to a frightening sight. The night before, the ridges of nearby Dorchester Heights had been bare. Now they bristled with cannons, all aimed at the city. Rather than risk another battle, General Howe abandoned the city. Within days, more than 100 ships left Boston Harbor for Canada. The ships carried 9,000 British troops, as well as 1,100 loyalists, who preferred to leave their homes behind rather than live with rebels. Some Americans hoped the war was over. Washington, however, knew it was only the beginning. Okay, so that's section 2. Now you're going to scroll down to the questions. Here are the ISN questions. Now, like I said, you are not going to have to do all of these. I just want you to do questions number 1. Who did John Adams propose should be Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army? And what was the main reason he suggested, and what was the main reason that he suggested this person? And then question number 3. Describe the event that took place in each of these locations and explain the importance of the event. Then we've got 2 events there. So you only need to do number 1 and number 3. Don't worry about number 2. And we will go over these questions in class next time we meet. Okay, now I'm going to read the next section, section 3. All right, section 3, on the eve of independence. Nearly a year passed between the skirmishes at Lexington and Concord and the British retreat from Boston. During that time, there was little talk of independence. Most colonists still considered themselves loyal British subjects. Their quarrel, or their argument, was not with Great Britain itself, but with its policies toward the colonies. The Olive Branch Petition. Many Americans pinned their hopes for peace on King George. In July 1775, the Second Continental Congress sent a petition to George III asking him to end the quarrel. John Adams called the petition an olive branch. Olive tree branches are an ancient symbol of peace. By the time the petition reached London, however, the king had declared the colonies to be an open and avowed rebellion. He ordered his ministers to bring the traitors to justice. Being called a traitor was enough to change the mind of one of Washington's generals. The general confessed that he had long looked with some degree of horror on the scheme of separation. Now he agreed with Patrick Henry that colonists must be independent or slaves. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. All right, common sense. Many colonists, however, still looked with horror at the idea of independence. Then, early in 1776, a patriot named Thomas Paine published a fiery pamphlet entitled Common Sense. Paine scoffed at the idea that Americans owed any loyalty to King George. Quote, "Of more worth is one honest man in society," he wrote, "than all the crowned ruffians who ever lived." Paine also attacked the argument that the colony's ties to Great Britain had benefited Americans. Just the opposite was true, he said. American trade had suffered under British control. Americans had also been hurt by being dragged into Great Britain's European wars. Paine ended with a vision of an independent America as a homeland of liberty. "Ye that love mankind," he urged, "ye that dare oppose not only the tyranny, but the tyrant, stand forth. The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth." Within a few months, more than 120,000 copies of Common Sense were printed in the colonies. Paine's arguments helped persuade thousands of colonists that independence was not only sensible, that it not only made sense, but that it was the key to a brighter future. Okay, we've read section 3. Now let's look at the ISN notes. Don't worry about the first question. All you need to do is this second one here. It says, in the Venn diagram, which is this thing right here, record one similarity and 3 differences between the Olive Branch petition and Common Sense. So you're going to compare those 2 documents that we read about in this section. Okay, so that's it for now. Thanks for watching the video. And remember, you can always go back in the video if you have any questions, or you can just ask me in class. All right, thanks and goodbye.